Never attribute to malice that which can be attributed to incompetence. Words to live by. An interesting thing about watching Mr. H reviews his perspective on Raised by Wolves. I started at the very ending where he talks about it being canceled and him feeling upset about what a great show it was. He takes that opportunity to take a dig at Batwoman, saying, Batwoman has 4 seasons and this show gets canceled, moi. But that little uh, emotional aside, uh, that little digression aside, he he's truly upset over the show not being around anymore. And I just assumed that he must have always liked the show and always supported the show. So I checked out some of his earlier reviews. And the first review he gave was of season 1. And it was actually deja vu. And what he was talking about was that he was reviewing episode 2 and 3 of the show, and what he was saying is that this is essentially, he is very familiar with this world and how lazy it was that Ridley Scott used the same set that he used for Prometheus, and how he lost faith in him as a creator, and how he's concerned about, he compared it to sex. He's like essentially saying that he's concerned about being edged to the point of coming but never having the climax. He doesn't want to get, he doesn't want to get all hot and bothered only to be dissatisfied in the end. And it, interesting sexual analogy aside, I found the interesting thing about that well, when you got past that first review, you had another review, and it was the season 1 finale. And sorry, the episode 6 and 7 review, then the episode 8 and 9 review of season 1, and then episode 10, the first season finale review. And he still has doubts about the show. And by the end of the second season, he's talking about how he's by the end of the second season, he's talking about how he's balls deep and how he can't wait for the next season. And you get this story arc of him being the skeptical fan. And what he says is that it's obvious that Ridley Scott was using this as a vehicle to tell the stories that he couldn't present to you in Aliens Covenant. But there's this video, and it is of an old, is it skeptical or miserly? It's essentially the Christmas story. There's a Secret Santa, and the Secret Santa gives him $4,000 worth of gas cards, and he's blown away with just that. And then this same Secret Santa also gives him like a $10,000 Christmas present. And he talks about how he's going to retire off of that with that money, and et cetera, et cetera. And then he starts choking up because he never knew anyone gave this much of a shit about him. And its point was to give it was a heartwarming story, but it was sort of forced. Because what do you think of that? What do you think of these gift cards you were given? What do you think about the fact that this anonymous person who we're not going to tell you about gave you this $10,000 check that you can cash at any bank and they'll put in your account? And so it was, on one level it was sweet, on some level it was obviously performative on the part of the person, at least the reporter presenting it. And I thought it was just so forced, because I thought, well, I mean, him not believing that anyone gave a shit about him was his reality for the majority of his life. And it might surprise him that someone actually does give a shit about him, but ultimately he doesn't even know who it is. So then there's still the anonymity of the world. The anonymity of the world. There's still the fact that he's not going to be able to point to one person, and not even necessarily to be able to say that this specific person gives shit about me, but just to be able to shake someone's hand and say, thank you for this gift, and look him or her in the eye and say, thanks for always having faith in me. And this specific person is why I have a continued faith in humanity. Instead, there's still the anonymity of the world, and aw shucks, randomness of the possibility of death around every corner. So I thought that was that. There's that. But similarly here, not unlike that miserly guy, that curmudgeon who was it a pessimist? I forget what exactly they said about him, but not unlike that old truck driver. This person, Mr. H's review, Mr. H reviews in this case, was like this truck driver, jaded, skeptical, hesitant to say the least. And he goes from being hesitant to being surprised at what the show is. And the interesting thing is, by the end of the second season, he has the same thing. By the end of the second season, he's still confused as to what's happening. He still has no idea what's happening, but he's invested. He's emotionally invested. Is the difference between Mr. H at the very beginning of the story, of the very beginning of season one, even at the end of season, even at the end of season one, and the Mr. H that exists after season two. He's invested in the story, emotionally invested. And I think that is an interesting story. The story of I didn't... And my point is, from his perspective, it's obvious that this is what Ridley Scott's doing because he has like 250-something videos about the lore of Alien. So, of course, from his perspective, from someone who is extremely into the world that Ridley Scott originally created, it seems obvious. He's like, obviously, you people have to be smarter than that. I'm like, well, they're not alien heads like you are, bro. So no, they're not smarter than that. And I'd appreciate if you didn't denigrate them for not being as obsessed with the subject matter as you are. At the end of season one, he's sure that Ridley Scott, at the beginning of the show, the video talking about, it's not even the beginning of the show. It's episode, it's the very beginning. It's Deja Vu, Alien Covenant Deja Vu. What he's saying is Ridley Scott's Ridley Scott's project. It's Ridley Scott's brainchild. It's his intellectual property, and he's sure of it. And later on, he goes, well, Ridley Scott's a producer, but he didn't. So the fact that Ridley Scott wasn't actually in control of it, as he was so sure of in the Alien Covenant Deja Vu video, that distance allowed him to start thinking of it allowed him to invest hope, right? Which is what he wasn't doing before. Because again, with 256 videos about Alien, any mystery had been sort of stamped out, replaced with obsession and full-fledged knowledge. At this point, at the end of the first video, Deja Vu, he is what my mother would say about this founder of Ernst & Young, Gideon. He said, "You seem to speak with great authority about that which you know nothing." He's speaking with great authority about that which he knows nothing. He knows nothing about the show. He has no insight greater than the audience. He's just another asshole in the audience, and yet he is confident that he knows what he's talking about.